Hey, welcome to the Tool Shed. So this is a tool, but it's more of a concept. But sometimes these concepts really can become tools if we can think about them as a new way of being in the world. And one of the most beautiful things I've discovered in Man Uprising peer groups, participating in them. I always think of the Hair Club for Men, right? I'm not only the president, I'm a user. In that case, I'm neither. Have experienced what my friend and co-founder Cam Moken calls Instimacy, and I know he got that from somewhere else, but he brought it to me, and I love this idea: intimacy, instant intimacy. So how is this a tool, or how do we use this in our life, and especially the peer group? I'm going to add this to the section on Man Uprising peer groups because I think it's important to really think about this as we head into our peer groups. So intimacy is, I think, the goal of life. I think it's the goal of relationship. And for a man rising up in the second half of life, I truly believe it's something we have to rise up into because we're not either built for or trained in the art of intimacy. We live in a world, especially as men, where we are taught or we need to be armored, right? It's the first half of life. The morning of life is all about armoring up, making sure you have the right armor and you know how to use your weapons, and you go out into the world and as a conquest and you conquer and you climb and you compete and all these C words, I guess. And the bottom line is that's fine. It works. It acquires and accumulates and achieves, and that has its place. I don't look down upon that. But then you get to the second half of life, and the afternoon of life, at least for the men I know who want to rise up in the second half of life, and they want something more. They want a new way of being in the world, and that way is vulnerability. It's openness. It's authenticity. It's intimacy. As Wayne Dyer, my teacher, says, intimacy, to see and to be seen. We're just not either taught or wired that way as men, and so we really have to become conscious or intentional around intimacy. And sometimes that just takes time. It does. Intimacy, certainly according to the morning of life rules, has to be earned, has to take time. You can't rush it, you can't force it. And although that's true, we can create intimacy. Certainly, we can accelerate the process. I've seen this before when there's a trauma, when there's a tragedy. Think of like 9/11. People on 9/12 in the aftermath of 9/11 had immediate intimacy. They went through something together. Now, granted, over time, 9/13, 9/14, a year later, 2 years later, that's lost. But trauma or challenge or difficult situations can really create an accelerated pace of intimacy. Isn't it a shame, though, that that's really only true around traumatic situations? We should be able to get there, though, around more proactive, around less suffering-filled circumstances. And that's where a peer group comes in. A peer group is a group of people, but in our case, a Man Uprising peer group, a group of men, second half of life, who come together and say, I don't want to compete. I don't want to fight. I don't want to be in a relationship with, in this case, guys around me where we're vying for something. It's against one another. It's adversarial. I want to be in a relationship where there's no competition. This is just truly supporting one another. It's a new way of being in the world. And when we come into that group, we go into the world and we take this with us with that mindset. It doesn't have to be a zero-sum game where my win is your loss or vice versa. But rising tides lifts all ships, and I want to be here to hold space for you, to celebrate your victories, to mourn your losses, to walk with you every step of the way in between. When we come into it with that intention, you have intimacy. It is an accelerated pace. I've seen it time and again where guys drop the, big dick contest. And it's not about that. They check the cape at the door. It's no longer, posturing and jockeying, and it's just being vulnerable and being open and being honest. My God, it is such a beautiful thing to witness men coming together and creating intimacy. So think of this as a tool. Set intentions before you go into your peer group for sure, but in any group, in any situation, and you will accelerate the process of bringing intimacy in your life when we're intentional about taking off the armor, when we're intentional about non-competitive conversations or situations, when we don't tell people what to do. We don't try and fix people. We just hold a space for other to work through their shit, to unload, to be honest, to be real. You accelerate this experience, I'm telling you, like no other place in your life. And it is good for them, whoever's they are across from you, and it is good for you, and it is honest, authentic, and real, and it takes you into a place of vulnerability, which as a man in life, and especially the second half of life, I can tell you is worth its weight in gold. So think about setting the intention and showing up committed to intimacy, and that will create Instimacy, accelerate the process, the journey, and help you and those across from you rise up in the second half of all of your lives.